Well, sure.
Okay, we are recording. Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So wonderful to be here with you today. And we're here with Tiffany Rouscult. She's an English professor here at SLIC, and she's also the SOCC Writing Across the College program director too. So she does workshops for students, staff, and faculty, and many, many, many of those. And we're just happy to have her here today. We had heard about people who were journaling during these difficult times. And I approached Tiffany. I think she had mentioned something about doing a workshop like this last summer. And I mentioned it to her again, and she was all on board. And we are so glad. It's well needed. It's a way for all of us to release our tensions. And Tiffany's going to walk us through how to do this properly so we can get the most out of it. So this is journaling in difficult times. And just thank you so much. We are recording today. We'll post it to the staff development website afterward. I'm just going to turn the time over to Tiffany right now, and we'll get started. So thank you once again for coming.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here. Feel free to have your cameras on or off during this. It's absolutely fine, either one. There's so many of you that I can't see all of you anyway, so it's up to you to whether or not you have your cameras on or off. So what we're going to do is, let me get this to work here. So these are the goals for the workshop. So we're going to learn why writing can help reduce stress, different ways to use writing to reduce stress, strategies for getting started writing and for keeping going, because that's kind of the hardest part about a journal in the first place, is to get started and to keep going. And then throughout the workshop today, we're going to do some journaling activities. So hopefully you all have something to write with. It can either be pen, paper, notebook, journal, or your computer, whatever you need, okay? So I'm going to go, and I'm going to be watching the chat, but also feel free to unmute yourself and just speak out if you have a question or want to say something. Okay, before we get started though, I need to make it very clear that journaling is not a substitute for professional mental health support and treatment. If you are in crisis, feel like you might harm yourself or someone else, or feel like you cannot cope, contact 911 and your healthcare provider. And I'm going to just leave this on here for just a moment so that you can write down those phone numbers if you would like to, for the UNI crisis line, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and the SLCC Center for Health and Counseling. So I'm just going to pause for 1 minute for you to write those down if you'd like to. Okay, so let's go on. Oops. Okay, so we're going to start with a 3-minute write. I have a timer right here, and I've got some music on here as well to make it a little bit more pleasant. I want you just to start writing with this prompt: recently life has been, and I want you just to write for the full 3 minutes, okay? So go ahead and start that now. Okay, you've got 1 more minute. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, go ahead and finish up whatever sentence you're on, and go ahead and come back to the workshop. All right, so let's first talk about why and how writing and journaling reduces stress or can help things. So obviously the first thing it can do is it can release emotions. And one thing that's important to do when you're journaling is to allow yourself to have the emotions come through your writing, particularly if you're writing with pen or pencil. It's a little bit harder to have big emotions come out viscerally through the computer because you might break your computer and your keyboard. But when you are using handwriting, you can write harder with the pen or lighter with the pen, or you can get real jagged with the pen, and the emotions actually come out through the actual writing. Interestingly, writing also helps you process feelings. When we have the feelings just in our minds and they kind of circle around and circle around and circle around, sometimes they don't get anywhere. But once you, when you put them out onto, when you externalize them from yourself, they then become more static, and then you can look at them, and you don't have to try to remember at the same time you're trying to process them. Now, when you put these feelings out on paper, one thing that happens is you can identify patterns. So as you journal over a period of time, you might see that you're coming back to the same feelings, or you might see that you're coming back to the same like reasons or causes for feelings. And so you can identify patterns in yourself and in others and in your circumstances that can help you see what's going on. This helps you with clarity. And so like this, I love this picture. This is like my brain. And so like with clarity, when you write stuff, when you externalize it, you can then sift through it more. It's not objectively, but it's like it's outside of yourself. It's not in yourself and chewing you to pieces. And so you can see what's going on. And through that, you can solve problems. Some problems will just stick with you forever, and you can't quite figure out why it's a problem. But over time, identifying patterns and finding clarity, you can start to work towards solving them. And this all is a part of increasing your self-knowledge. The better we know ourselves, the better we know what we can cope with, what we can't cope with, also what we need to do to take care of ourselves and take care of others. And that all helps tremendously. And also, even when things are hard, it's a positive thing to practice gratitude. And I don't really mean in that like super warm and fuzzy way of practicing gratitude. I mean in the like actually paying attention to the things that you have good going on in your life, because at least from what I understand with how brains work, and I teach writing, I am not a biologist, I am not a psychologist, but our brains tend to hold on to negative experiences and negative emotions harder, more tightly. It's something about evolution and how our brains got put together. So practicing gratitude kind of counteracts that, or at least gets some of those positive things in our minds. So ultimately, this is all about working towards contentment. And I like the term contentment and not happiness, because happiness, I think, sometimes puts too much pressure on us to feel a certain way. And so contentment, being okay with how things are going, is sort of the goal. Now, one other way that journaling can reduce stress is there's a lot of research that shows that journaling and writing can have an integrative effect on trauma. So if you've experienced trauma, there's processes that when you're writing, you're using both sides of your brain, and it can integrate the experience, and it can create some order to it. But trauma should never be dealt with just through journaling alone. It should always be done with a professional. There was a period of time about, I want to say like 18 years ago, when this research was just coming out about writing and trauma, and a whole bunch of writing teachers suddenly started putting a whole bunch of emotionally focused assignments into their curriculum. And it was just terrifying because you had a bunch of writing teachers like dealing with trauma, and it was not good. So if you have experienced trauma and you want to use journaling, just make sure that you are working with a professional. Okay. I'm going to pause there for a second to see if anybody has any questions or thoughts before we move to the next writing prompt. Okay, people will have had enough time to turn off their mute or put a chat in, so I think we're good. Okay, so we're going to go to a writing prompt again, and this next one's going to be a little bit longer. And this is a 6-minute write, and this one I'm asking you to just write, what do you need in your life? I'll tell you when it's 3 minutes and when it's 1 minute and when it's time up. And if you get stuck, just keep writing. You can write nonsense. You've been writing for 3 minutes. Keep going for 3 more. Okay, one more minute. Okay, go ahead and finish up the sentence that you're on, and then come on back to the workshop. So I'm curious how different it was for people to write for 6 minutes than it was to write for 3 minutes. If anybody wants to either put a comment in the chat or if they want to just unmute and talk for a minute.
This is Gordon, and I didn't find it more difficult or easier to write 6 minutes. Once you get started, stuff just flies out.
Okay, good.
This is Diane Edmonds. One of the things that I found is that I have journaled in the past quite a bit, and I packed my stuff away when I painted my room. I realized I need to get my journal back out and start journaling again.
Great. Okay. We've got some comments in the chat. Natasha says, I found that since I knew I had more time, I elaborated more. And Tanisa said, I felt time went faster writing for 6 minutes. And Jashane said, for me, I think the prompt changes the ease of flow. And Julie wrote, I struggled a little more when writing for 6 minutes. Michael says, I found it easier because I was less constrained by time. Okay. Excellent. So generally, and I'll talk about this again at the very end, generally, the general rule of thumb, I guess, if there is a rule of thumb. Oh, sorry, Heather wrote, when I was writing for only 3, I almost felt like I ran out of time before I finished my thoughts. Yeah, that makes sense, Heather. So the general rule of thumb with writing and journaling is if you're using it to help you with stress or help you, through difficult times, is to write for at least 15 to 20 minutes in a sitting. And that's because the first few minutes you're just sort of, you're kind of like clearing out the cobwebs, or you're just sort of starting to pull through some of the muck in your brain. And what you'll find as you read back over your journals that the first maybe few lines or few sentences of a journal may feel sort of rote or automatic. And then it's when you start getting into the flow of it that ideas will start to generate. And one of the most interesting things I think about this type of writing, about free writing, where you just make yourself write for the period of time, even if you don't feel like you have something to say, is new ideas will emerge and new feelings will emerge that you didn't even necessarily know were there. And if you run out of something to say when you're writing, what I do is I write my last sentence or the last phrase over and over and over and over until my mind starts working again. And it's never ceased to amaze me that I'll be writing along on a problem and I just feel like I can't figure it out. And then, I don't know, 15 minutes later, suddenly something has been revealed. And I'm like, oh, yes, that's obvious. Or, oh, I didn't realize that's what it was. So, okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so there's different ways to journal. First of all, I have all of these different artifacts over here of what your journal could be. Now, I would be surprised if any of you felt this, but I just want to make sure it's very clear that you should journal with the type of book, notebook, computer, whatever fits you best, okay? So there's this like really fancy leather journal here, or this one with a lock on it, or, some of the nicer ones. You don't need to get that to journal, but if that inspires you to journal, then go out and spend the $20 for it. or some of them are so expensive. But also, you know, your one subject Mead book, you know, that costs, I don't know, 75 cents or $1, that works just as well. A notepad that you can carry around with you works just as well. And then any type of computer, you know, computer device that you have will work as well. So get what suits you. The key is, I think, to not purchase something that will make you feel guilty if you don't use it. so you want to get something that's just going to feel good, feels right, doesn't feel pressured. Because if you're going to pressure yourself to journal, then that just sort of defeats the purpose. Okay. So there's kind of 5 main ways to journal. So one is to just free write. And so that's like starting with a prompt or just sitting down and starting to write. What I tend to do is I just write today and then I just go. Free writing works really well for me for some reason. And free writing is that type of writing where you don't let yourself stop even when you run out of an idea. You just keep going and keep going and keep going. Or you can respond to questions or prompts, specific prompts. Now, at the end of the workshop, I'm going to send to Deanne a list of 50 prompts that I've put together, and then she'll send them out to you. One way to get started is, so they're all numbered, is you can just pick a number from between 1 and 50, grab that one, and that will get you started. Another thing to do is to list. Some people are really great listers, and so like, you know, maybe to have a response, you know, maybe like today, this is what I'm feeling. And you just might do bullets of just individual words or phrases, and then it can just get further and further and further. There's no right way or wrong way. This ask and answer is, whoops, hang on, let me move back a second. Asking and answering is where you ask yourself a question, then you answer it, and for about, you know, a few minutes, and then you'll pull a question out from that answer and ask that question, and then answer that one, then pull a question out and ask a question, then answer. And that can be a really good way of getting more into depth. And then one thing, when I was preparing for this workshop, I read a few sources that said that it was good to go back and reread your journals and to sort of take an idea and rethink it in a different one. And I have not done that very much. Mostly because I can't read my writing in my journals in many ways, because I'm usually just writing so quickly. But I'll look back at them occasionally if I'm trying to figure out, like, maybe when something started or when I first tried to, you know, start to resolve a problem. But so that's another thing that you can do. Now, one thing that comes up is that I don't know if you're writing with your computers right now or if you are writing like this, but if you're writing like this, I'm assuming that your hand is starting to get sore because you've written for 10 minutes and you're probably not very used to handwriting. And so it takes time to develop the muscles in our hands, because we don't write like this that much. So you'll get cramps and stuff, but that will get better, I assure you. It takes, if you're writing regularly, it takes about, I don't know, maybe about, you know, 4 to 6 times of writing regularly, and it will get better. But if you have any types of like physical, like pain as you're writing that lasts, remember that speech to text is writing. So you can get on your computer, you can open up Microsoft Word, hit the speech to text. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but just talk. And just talking into it is writing as well. And you can do the same exact thing. You'd probably want to be in a quiet room so that somebody's not overhearing you. But just know that speech to text is writing. Okay, it's not speaking, because you're doing it into a journal, and so your brain is actually processing it like writing. Okay, so let me take a moment to pause to see if anybody has any questions or thoughts before we go to the next one. All right. People seem okay. So this next one is a little bit shorter, and it's asking you to list. And I want you to list at least 10 positive things in your life. And if you can do that within 4 minutes and you have time, I want you to keep going. List as many as you can. You've got about a minute left. Okay, go ahead and finish up what you're working on. And you may or may not have had enough time to finish all 10. I estimated how long to make these writing breaks, and I'm not sure if they're too long or too short. You guys can give me feedback on that in the feedback. And so how did listing feel for you all? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I just found it interesting because on what do you need in your life, I actually did that as a list.
Okay, good.
So I was like, oh, and they were very similar. So
That's very good. Good. And Natasha says she loves listing. She's a national list maker, a natural list maker. Okay, and Erin said it was easier to get started with a list. Interesting. Okay. And another thing that you can do is you can make a list and then you can pick one of the things on the list and then do a free write on it as well. And so that's another way to develop ideas. Michael said, listing is nice when I have a limited amount of time and feels more natural to me, but when I have the time and energy to do so, writing outwardly is great too. Makes sense. I am not sure who C. Cassius is, but the hardest thing, couldn't come up with 10. I'm so sorry. It is, and when we're feeling stressed and when we're feeling bad, it can be very hard to come up with 10 positive things. And so like you start looking small. So like one positive thing in my life right now is I'll just show you my new shoes that I bought that are awesome and comfortable. And you kind of got to start pushing to just find something small when you're feeling when it's really hard, and it sounds ridiculous, but it actually does help, because every time I put those shoes on, I actually feel somewhat grateful. Gordon, did you want to say something?
Oh, for me, again, it was really easy because I don't have to elaborate on anything. I can just put down 3 or 4 or 5 words and just move along quickly and put a lot of thoughts on the paper really fast. And then it would
Okay.
be fun to go back and add to them later.
Yeah, one of the goals that you kind of want to get to with journaling, the way that it helps with stress and with like negative feelings, negative experiences, is if you kind of force yourself to sit with like an idea or a thought for a period of time. So it's great to start with a list, absolutely. But then at some point, take some of them and try to explore it a little bit, explore something a little bit, and that would help. Thank you, Heather, for saying my shoes are cute. And Tanisa said, I felt that my list seemed very simple and almost too dead end to be a writing prompt, if that makes sense. Absolutely. That does make sense. Absolutely. And that's why for some prompts, a list is going to work. For some prompts, it's not going to work. And also, if they feel like dead ends, then do that thing that, grabbing that idea and then going into it in more depth. Okay. Other things that anybody wants to add? Okay, so I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, so here's some strategies, all right? The hardest part about journaling is actually doing it. So when you are, it's like actually talking yourself into doing it, finding the time for doing it. And so it was funny because I have not actually been journaling for quite some time. I started out at the beginning of the pandemic, and then I just kind of got into the sludge of the pandemic and just, and everything else was just, everything so crisis laden that I couldn't find the time to journal. And I realized this weekend that I'm teaching a workshop on journaling, so I better start journaling again. So I have, but it's difficult. And I feel myself saying this morning, I was like, oh, I got to journal. And I did, but that's the hard thing to do. So here's things to help you get started doing it and to keep doing it. So one thing is consistency. Now, a lot of things that you'll see online say that you need to write for at least 15 to 20 minutes every single day. And that is not true. And that's too much pressure. Okay. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create a habit. And so I think it's reasonable to write at least 3 times a week. If you need to establish a habit by doing something every day at first, then by all means do that. Some of the recommendations say that you should try to write at the same time and in the same place each day, or when you're repeating this. If that works for you, that's fantastic. My house doesn't really allow me that type of consistency right now. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to do it when I have the time. And so I'm trying to just say, okay, I'm going to go outside, or I'm going to go, I don't know, in my closet or something like that, just to have a little bit of time by myself to do a little bit of writing. And when you do it, really shoot for that 15 to 20 minutes, because that's the biggest thing that we'll do. But if you don't do it, if you don't manage the 15 to 20 minutes, don't stress out about that, okay? Privacy is very important when you're writing in a journal to start out with. You are, of course, allowed to share it with other people, but you should write your journal for yourself at first. That's how you get the most benefit out of it. Because there's different types of journals. Like there's journaling where you're trying to record history. Like there's pandemic journals going on right now where people are writing, what's happening, for them during, this period in time. And the point of those is to establish sort of a history and memories of what's going on. But journaling for difficult times and journaling to reduce stress is a different purpose. And so write for yourself. You should plan that nobody's going to be looking at this unless you want them to, okay? Make things very convenient for yourself. Bring your journal around with you where you go, whether it's paper or electronic. You're wanting to be able to, when you have the time, to be able to sit down and do some writing. Be very patient with yourself. The very worst thing that journaling to reduce your stress can do is to increase your stress. When you start feeling bad that you haven't journaled, you got to take all of that and just like chuck it out the window, because that's not the point of this. So if you stop, to say, oh, I stopped. All right, I'm patient with myself. I'm just going to start again. Okay. Kindness to yourself. Accept what comes when you're journaling. No judgment at all. We have to be kind to ourselves, and we are probably the least kind people to ourselves. I'm meaner to myself than I am to anybody else, except maybe my family members. But usually I'm meaner to myself. But you know the whole, you got to be kind to yourself to be kind to others, but also bravery. So if you really get into this journaling, you may reveal things that it's not very comfortable to you. You might not really enjoy finding. So you kind of got to be brave to keep going through it, and just keep writing and accept what comes. No judgment. Okay. So does anybody have any thoughts on these strategies before we go to our next writing? So Natasha said, I think another strategy is to try different mediums. I'm typing my journaling today for this workshop, but usually I handwrite in a lined notebook. I prefer the handwriting. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So if one's not working for you, if one feels better than the other, at any given time. I mean, sometimes I'm handwriting right now just because it feels like it's the right thing to do. I feel like I can express my emotions better in handwriting. But sometimes if I'm journaling to work out a problem that I'm having, I might end up typing that because I can type faster than I can handwrite, and I can work through my ideas faster that way. Any other thoughts on these? Jennifer said, I'm afraid someone will find it and it's so private, even after I'm dead. Jennifer, you should at some point, if you feel like it, bury them, burn them, or throw them away. Okay. And that is completely fine. I have some that I have gotten rid of myself from my angsty 20s. So, because no, I would never want somebody to find it. But I do have some from my angsty 20s that I've kept because of like the realizations that I found, and I don't ever want to forget them. But yeah, you got to be very careful. You got to be very careful about where you put them, where you keep them, that type of a thing. Beth Ann wrote, I've told a close friend to find them if I would die and burn them. I know she won't read them and won't judge. Yeah, great. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. This is a funny story. What time is it? Let me see. Yeah, I have time to tell you this funny story. So when I first started at SLCC 28 years ago, I was put out, my office was out in this trailer out where the science building is now. And I got this computer, they gave me this computer, and I start, using it and looking through it. And I pull up this file, and it's a file full of journal entries from somebody in my department who was going through a divorce. And it was just unbelievable that it was on there. So I contacted this person and said, and I didn't read them. I just read the first little bit, and I was like, so yeah, you got to be careful about this stuff. And Michael said, I write notes on my phone with a good chunk of the time, but also blog every week a day, and that makes a huge difference. I find making those thoughts public, if you can do it, helps you to find relatability with other people and to share that stress and that connection. That's a great idea, Michael. Yeah, if you feel like sharing your thoughts is like it doesn't put you at any type of emotional risk, then absolutely, I think that's great. And I love the idea of the relatability to relate to other people. I think that's a great point. Any other thoughts? Okay, we're going to go to our last write, and this is a 7-minute write. Okay. And this write is, a year from now, I hope that. And just go ahead and start whatever way you want, listing, free writing, whatever you want. Okay, you've got 3 more minutes. Okay, you've got 1 more minute. Okay, go ahead and finish up what you're working on. Okay, so you have written for 20 minutes in this workshop. So that shows that you can do it. And let me go to the next slide. So these are just some other thoughts. Okay, let me move this out of the way a little bit. All right, gonna make that smaller. Hang on a second. Okay. So again, try to write for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, but don't worry if you don't. If your brain can't think of what to write, just repeat a word or a phrase until your brain turns on again. Turn off your editor. And so what this means is we're constantly, sort of judging ourselves as we write. That happens all the time. And so if you're working on your computer, the best way to do this is to turn down your computer screen. Just make sure that you have your fingers on the right keys, and turn off your computer screen so you can't see what you're writing, and write for maybe 5-10 minutes, and then you can turn your computer screen back up, read what you've written, turn it back down, write again. And I've written here right outside the lines. And what I mean by that is if you're writing on lined paper, allow yourself to break the rules that you learned in school about, having the margins just right, and writing very neatly so that it could be read. This is for you to write your own thoughts in your own way. And so, get crazy, write 2 lines at a time, or, write all the way around in circles, or just don't worry about neatness. Don't worry about any of that. Just write for yourself. And then ultimately, ask for help when you need it. We are experiencing very difficult times right now on so many levels. So, if you're journaling, bring some stuff out that you need some help with, ask for help, ask a friend, ask a family member, ask a professional, call the Center for Health and Counseling at the college. You're not alone. And so make sure that you reach out for that help. Okay. And so that is all that I had for this. What I plan to do is I'm going to send Deanne a list of 50 prompts, and I'll send her slides of this presentation if you want it. But now let's just take a moment and let's just see if anybody has anything they want to say, either on the audio or through the chat. Okay. It's looking like people are okay. All right, so go ahead and log off whenever you want to. If you want to stick around and ask me a question, feel free. I'm going to stop screen sharing. And if you want to stick around and just ask me something, I'll be here for a few more minutes, and then I will give the recording to Deanne. I missed you too, Diane.